In 1997, Apple was reportedly just 90 days from running out of cash, and the company's salvation came from the one brand Apple fans hated most: Microsoft. Picture this: Macworld, Boston, 1997. Steve Jobs has just returned to Apple. The company is in crisis, reportedly about 90 days from bankruptcy, and losing around $1 billion a year, according to accounts shared on Instagram and LinkedIn summarizing that era. On stage, Jobs does something nobody expects. Behind him, a giant screen lights up. Bill Gates appears via satellite, smiling. The crowd, hardcore Apple loyalists, boos. According to a CNBC recap of that moment, Apple had been on the brink of bankruptcy. Jobs, back in power, announces that Microsoft, Apple's arch-rival, the same company Apple fans hated with passion, as one LinkedIn post puts it, will invest $150 million in Apple and keep Microsoft Office on the Mac. To the audience, it feels like betrayal. To Jobs, it's survival. According to one retelling, Jobs later summed up the mindset shift. Apple didn't have to beat Microsoft. Apple had to remember who Apple was. That deal, and what Jobs did with the breathing room it bought, turned Apple from a near-dead company into a multi-trillion-dollar giant. But the real story isn't just about a check from Microsoft. It's about the brutal focus Jobs imposed the moment he got that second chance, and how that focus can save your finances, your business, or your career when you're the one 90 days from disaster. To understand why that Microsoft deal mattered, you have to see how lost Apple was. Back in the early 1980s, Apple had been the revolutionary. According to an account on LinkedIn, Steve Jobs invited Bill Gates to Apple's campus in 1983 to see a secret project: the Macintosh, icons, windows, a mouse, a graphical interface that made computers feel human. But by the mid-1990s, the magic had faded. Apple was pumping out too many products, too many variations, and not enough hits. An Instagram summary of the era notes that the company was suffering around $1 billion in annual losses and was close to running out of cash. When Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, after Apple acquired his company Next, according to that same Instagram account, he walked back into a mess: overlapping product lines, internal confusion, and a culture that had forgotten what made Apple different. The board and the market expected the usual corporate turnaround playbook: cut a bit everywhere, lay off people, trim marketing, and hope the bleeding slows. But Jobs knew Apple didn't just have a cost problem. Apple had an identity problem. According to commentary on LinkedIn, he believed Apple had forgotten who Apple was. The company was trying to be everything to everyone, and slowly becoming nothing to anyone. And without a radical change, there wouldn't be an Apple left to save. When Jobs picked up the phone to call Bill Gates, it wasn't about friendship. It was about survival and leverage. According to CNBC's account and LinkedIn breakdowns, here's what the 1997 deal between Apple and Microsoft actually involved. Microsoft invested $150 million in Apple, buying 150,000 shares of non-voting preferred stock. A LinkedIn analysis notes that this represented roughly 5 to 7% of Apple's equity at the time, and Microsoft agreed to hold the shares for at least 3 years. The shares were non-voting, which meant Microsoft couldn't control Apple's direction, according to that same LinkedIn breakdown. Apple, in turn, agreed to drop a lawsuit accusing Microsoft of copying its operating system, as CNBC reports. Microsoft committed to keep developing Microsoft Office for the Mac, which was crucial. According to CNBC, Microsoft was the biggest software developer outside of Apple building for the Mac. For Apple, this accomplished two huge things at once. First, cash. That $150 million didn't make Apple rich, but it bought time, a short-term lifeline instead of immediate bankruptcy, as multiple summaries describe it. Second, credibility. If your biggest rival is willing to buy your stock and promise to support your platform, the market hears one thing: we don't think this company is dead yet. For Microsoft, the logic was cold and strategic. The LinkedIn breakdown notes that the equity investment gave Microsoft upside and antitrust cover. It could point to its support of Apple when regulators asked whether it was crushing all competition. CNBC adds that Microsoft's Mac business actually worked out very well over the years. Gates himself said that every few years there was something new they could do on the Mac, and it's been a great business for us. So yes, Microsoft saved Apple in the sense that it kept Apple from flatlining in 1997. But that money, by itself, didn't turn Apple into a $3+ trillion giant later. What mattered was what Jobs did next. Most struggling companies spread rescue money thin, a little for this product, a little for that department, tiny cuts everywhere. Jobs did the opposite. According to a LinkedIn post analyzing his turnaround, instead of trimming everything equally, he eliminated about 70% of Apple's product line and focused all of Apple's resources on the remaining 30%. Another summary on Instagram puts it even more starkly. Jobs slashed dozens of projects down to just 4 categories: a desktop and a laptop for both consumers and professionals. Think about that. A company as big and as historic as Apple, willing to say no to most of what it made. Jobs didn't take Microsoft's $150 million and sprinkle it across dozens of struggling projects. According to that LinkedIn breakdown, he concentrated it, financially and mentally, on a few key bets, especially the iMac. He also brought in technology from Next, the company Apple had just acquired, to bring him back. One LinkedIn account notes that Jobs used tech he'd already developed at Next to help power the iMac. The result was radical simplification. Fewer products, but each with a clear purpose. A tighter roadmap so teams weren't scattered. A brand that felt coherent again. This was brutal focus. Not minimalist for its own sake, but ruthless prioritization. If it didn't fit Apple's future, it was gone. And here's the key. Microsoft's cash didn't save Apple. Apple's focus decided whether that cash would be a bridge or just a longer, slower decline. The first visible payoff of this focus was the iMac. According to a LinkedIn analysis of the turnaround, Jobs poured that newly secured breathing room, including the Microsoft investment, into perfecting the iMac rather than trying to rescue every legacy product. The iMac, launched in 1998, wasn't just another beige box. It was colorful, approachable, and more importantly, a statement. Apple remembered who Apple was, a company that made computers people actually wanted. That same LinkedIn account puts it bluntly. The iMac launch in 1998 saved the company. Around this time, Apple also launched the Think Different marketing campaign, which an Instagram summary credits as part of the transformation from near collapse to a trillion-dollar giant. The message matched the new strategy. Fewer products, stronger identity, bolder vision. And because of the Microsoft deal, crucial software like Office stayed on the Mac, which meant buyers didn't have to choose between style and practicality. But the true impact of this focus wasn't just one successful computer. It was the foundation for an entire decade of new categories. According to a LinkedIn breakdown, once Apple had breathing room, its focus shifted from simply competing with Windows to creating entirely new product categories. The iPod in 2001, the iPhone in 2007, the iPad in 2010. Each of those wasn't just a product, they were new markets. That same source notes that by 2010, Apple's market cap surpassed Microsoft's for the first time since the 1990s. And by 2011, Apple had become the world's most valuable company. Today, according to multiple LinkedIn summaries, Apple is worth on the order of $3.5 to $3.7 trillion, one of the most valuable companies on Earth, dominating smartphones, laptops, wearables, and more. And it all traces back to that moment in 1997. Microsoft buys Apple time, and Jobs refuses to waste it on half measures. For Microsoft, the story is more complicated, and a little ironic. When Gates agreed to the deal, Microsoft was, as CNBC puts it, by far and away the larger of the two companies. Supporting Apple looked like charity at the time, or at worst, a defensive move to show regulators it wasn't a monopoly. According to CNBC, the investment worked out financially, and Microsoft's Mac software business has been a great business. Gates himself said that every couple of years there was something new they could do on the Mac. But history had other plans. A LinkedIn breakdown notes that today both companies are worth trillions. Apple in the roughly $3.5+ trillion range. Microsoft also in the trillions. Yet Microsoft lost the mobile war to Apple and Android, the very space it once seemed destined to dominate. In other words, the underdog it helped keep alive became the giant that reshaped the industry. One LinkedIn commentary sums it up neatly. Even rivals may rescue you if it serves their interests. And a short-term lifeline, if used well, can buy the time you need for a long-term turnaround. That's true in business. It's just as true in your personal finances. So what's the lesson for you, the person who isn't negotiating 9-figure deals with Bill Gates? Here it is. A lifeline will not save you. Focus will. Microsoft's $150 million gave Apple time. But without Jobs' brutal decision to kill most of the product line and concentrate on a few high-conviction bets, that money would have just delayed the inevitable. Translate that to personal finance. A raise won't save you if you keep funding every lifestyle habit you already have. A debt consolidation loan won't save you if you keep all your old credit cards and spread your payments thin. A side hustle won't save you if your time and attention are split across 10 different projects that never finish. When you're in trouble, the instinct is to do everything. The lesson from Jobs' second act at Apple is to do almost nothing, except the right things. That means, cut the noise. Just like Apple killed 70% of its product line, you may need to cut most of your non-essential spending or side efforts, not trim them all by 5%. The Instagram and LinkedIn accounts describing Jobs' approach emphasize how he slashed dozens of projects down to just 4 clear focus areas. Pick a tiny number of priorities. Apple focused on 4 product categories. In your finances, that might be build a 3-month emergency fund, pay off 1 high-interest debt, and protect your income with basic insurance. Use any lifeline as a bridge, not a cushion. Apple used Microsoft's investment to fund a focused turnaround. iMac, a cleaned-up product line, a clear identity. If you get a bonus, a loan, or help from family, treat it as temporary fuel for a plan, not permission to keep living the same way. Remember who you are. As one CNBC quoted line puts it, Apple didn't have to beat Microsoft. It had to remember who Apple was. For you, that might mean aligning money decisions with what you actually value, not what impresses other people. Focus is uncomfortable. People will boo your decisions, just like the Macworld crowd booed when Bill Gates' face appeared on that giant screen. But if you're 90 days from disaster, survival won't look glamorous. It will look like saying no to almost everything, so you can finally say yes to the few things that matter. When you're on the edge, financially or in business, a bailout, a raise, or a loan won't save you by itself. Only brutal, strategic focus on a few high-impact priorities can turn a temporary lifeline into a permanent turnaround. If you feel like you're 90 days from your own financial disaster, pause and write down the 4 things that actually matter. Your version of Apple's simplified product line. Then in the next video, we'll walk through how to cut the rest and build your own turnaround plan from there. Subscribe so you don't miss it. Whoa.